Hello, my name is Patrick Usher. Do you have POTS and do you startle easily? Do you have difficulties with sounds? Do many sounds that used to be okay, everyday sounds that might come from the TV or radio, are they now too much? Do they give you headaches or migraines? Have you found yourself unable to watch TV or certain kinds of loud TV? Does the sound of a door banging seem excruciating to you? I want to consider these questions in relation to POTS, and if it is true for you, as someone who has POTS, that these are problems you struggle with, I want to offer some hopeful suggestions as to why it is the case. So, the first thing to bear in mind is that if it is true that POTS is caused by limbic system impairment, which is the theory I'm trying to put forward on this channel, the limbic system being the flight or fight part of the brain, then we have to remember that this is the part of the brain that processes stimuli. So all the outside, all perception from the outside world is filtered through the limbic system, and therefore, our auditory, our visual systems, they're filtered in through the limbic system. And under normal circumstances, our perception of stimuli remains, normal. We don't find certain noises to be too much unless they, there's the sound of someone drilling or there's a fire alarm going off or something like that. But if the limbic system enters a hardwired state of crisis following a traumatic event, such as a surgery, pregnancy, a difficult pregnancy, or viral illness, or Lyme disease, or psychological trauma, or all of the above, then it stands to reason that our ability to perceive stimuli will change. It will become heightened, because you have this part of your brain so very crucial. It's just become incredibly hypervigilant, and so all of a sudden, someone comes into your home and they close the door, and that seems like an unbearable noise because the parts of your brain that perceive that noise have become so heightened, so sensitive, so hypervigilant that you actually hear that door as closing as being something much louder than it is to the person who closed it, who has a neurotypical limbic system. And it's not something you're making up. It's not something that's all in your head. The only way it's all in your head is that it's, of course, your brain happens to sit in your head. But apart from that, it's not something you're making up because these parts of your brain that perceive the outside world are not something that are under your conscious control. If a trauma has tipped those automatic and highly primitive parts of your brain into this state, it's not something that you can control. It just happened as a result of the trauma. And so when you perceive that door closing to be very, very loud and just simply too much, then this is in fact very true for your brain and how it perceives the world, right? The only reason that the person who closes the door doesn't have that problem is because they don't have a limbic system impairment. They haven't experienced that level of trauma to tip their brain into that kind of crisis. And it just so happens that most people haven't experienced that level of trauma. But that's the only reason that it isn't kind of normal to hear a sound like that even louder than it is to most people. But it's very, very real to the person who's suffering with limbic system impairment. And so then this sensitivity then to noise will extend across all kinds of things. The TV, certain movies may become very hard to watch. There's simply too much stimulation, too much noise, and the radio, music, many kinds of music may become too much. And you may find that in extreme cases, just someone talking to you could cause a headache, or even a migraine or something like that. So it's very hard and a very kind of debilitating aspect of a condition which is already very debilitating. And I remember back to my own case, I didn't have huge problems with this aspect, but I do remember that my startle reflex, especially as connected with noise, was greatly increased. So when I had POTS a couple of years ago, I remember one specific incident where my dad was returning home, and I was sitting next to the window with my back to the window, and he wanted to alert me to the fact that he was arriving, so he tapped on the window. And I jumped out of my skin. It was such a loud noise. And I looked around, and then he sort of looked at me as if, like, what was my problem, that I looked so startled. But it was genuinely, it seemed like an overwhelming thing that whatever had just happened, all he'd done was just tap on the window. So this is something that is very much to be expected if you have a limbic system impairment, that your perception of noise will be very, very sensitive, and that your startle reflex will be more vigilant than usual. And if you're finding that this is the situation for you, my heart goes out to you, but I also want to say that it's actually a cause for hope, because this kind of thing is what shows that it's the brain that is the root cause of POTS, because it is the brain, the limbic system in particular, which processes stimuli, which processes sound. So if sounds are appearing too much, or you're having an increased startle reflex, there can only be one reason for that, and that is the brain. It's not from some other part of the body or some other organ, because the other organs and parts of the body don't deal with these mechanisms. So it points to the root cause being in the brain. So in that sense, it's a cause for hope, and it's a cause for you to have extra certainty that actually if you rewire your limbic system, if you get it out of a crisis state, you can recover from POTS and all of these sort of other aspects of the condition. So if that is the case for you, please do look at other videos on this channel, and please do consider looking into the Dynamic Neural Retraining System, which is a 6-month limbic system rehabilitation program which I followed to recover from POTS, and which I recommend most strongly. And so these signs are a cause for hope, as well as the obvious fact that they're very difficult to put up with and to live with, but they do point to a neurological origin, and the brain, although it can get really stuck in trauma, can be rewired out of that with enough diligence and if you have the right exercises. And I believe that the Dynamic Neural Retraining System provides those. So that's all I want to say about this topic. Please comment below if you have these kind of issues, if you're doing the DNRS program and you had these issues at the start, or and if they're shifting, if they're getting better, or if they haven't got better yet, do post below your experience to share with others on this particular aspect.